I found the spare key hidden in the planter box 3 months after she moved out. I still don't know if it was for me or for him. That question keeps me awake most nights now, along with about 100 others that will never have answers. My name is Warren Fitzgerald. I'm 76 years old. I spent 40 years working in manufacturing back in Manchester. Raised 2 kids who barely speak to me anymore. Buried a wife who I loved but who I think stopped loving me somewhere around year 12. When I retired 5 years ago, I sold the house, split the money with my ex-wife per our divorce settlement, and moved to Thailand with what was left. Not because I was running from anything, I told myself. Because I was running toward something, a new chapter, a fresh start, all those cliches people use when they're actually just tired of being lonely. I met Wipada in January 2020, right before the world shut down. I was 71. She was 27. Yes, I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too, at first. But she made me feel something I hadn't felt in decades. Young, wanted, like I mattered to someone who wasn't obligated by blood or history to pretend to care. We met at a small restaurant in Isaan, not a bar, not a massage parlor, just a regular family-run place where I'd started eating lunch 3 times a week because the cowman guy reminded me of a roast chicken dinner my mom used to make when I was a boy. Wipada worked there. Service worker, taking orders, bringing food, smiling at customers. She had this smile that seemed to exist only for you when she was looking at you. I know now that wasn't true. But back then, God, it felt true. She spoke decent English, better than my Thai, which was essentially non-existent beyond Sawati crap and Kop Kun crap. We started talking. Small talk at first. Where are you from? How long in Thailand? Do you like Thai food? The usual expat local script. But then it became more. She'd sit with me between customers, tell me about her family in the village, her younger brother who wanted to go to university, her mother who was sick, her father who drank too much, the ex-boyfriend who'd broken her heart and left her struggling to support everyone alone. I felt needed. That was the drug. Not the sex, though that came later, and yes, it mattered to an old man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched with something resembling enthusiasm. But more than that, I felt needed. She needed me, or I thought she did. Within 2 months, we were together, officially. She called me her boyfriend. I called her my girlfriend. My mates back in Manchester thought I'd lost my mind. My daughter sent me a brutally honest email about power dynamics and exploitation that I deleted halfway through reading. Everyone had opinions. Everyone was sure I was being used. But I wasn't some naive fool, I told myself. I'd been married for 30 years. I'd raised children. I'd worked jobs and paid mortgages and buried both my parents. I wasn't some sex tourist stumbling out of a go-go bar with stars in his eyes. Wipada wasn't a bar girl. She was a regular woman with a regular job who just happened to be younger than me. Age is just a number, I said. Love doesn't care about calendars, I said. I said a lot of stupid things. By June 2020, COVID had Thailand locked down tight. Wipada lost her job when the restaurant closed. Her family was struggling. Her mother's medical bills were piling up. Her brother's university dreams were slipping away. I did what I thought a good man, a good partner, should do. I helped. I sent money for the medical bills. I paid for the brother's tuition. I covered rent for her small room in town so she wouldn't have to move back to the village and sleep on a mat on her parents' floor. And when she cried about feeling like a burden, about hating that she had to take money from me, I told her what I genuinely believed. This is what people do when they love each other. They help each other. I want to do this. In September 2020, I bought a house. Not a mansion, nothing extravagant, but a proper house in a decent neighborhood on the outskirts of Udon Thani. 3 bedrooms, tiled floors, a small garden, a wall around the property. It cost me about £60,000, which was most of what I had left from selling the Manchester house after the divorce settlement. I put it in my name. I'm not completely stupid, but I bought it for us, for our future together. Wipada moved in immediately. She decorated it, hung curtains, bought furniture from the local market, planted herbs in the garden. She made it feel like a home, like our home. She'd wake up early and make me coffee. We'd sit in the garden in the mornings before the heat became unbearable, and she'd practice her English while I butchered my way through Thai phrases that made her laugh so hard she'd nearly choke. I loved her. I mean that. I genuinely loved her. She made me feel alive again in a way I didn't think was possible at my age. The sex was good, yes, better than anything I'd had in decades, but it was more than that. It was companionship. It was having someone to talk to over breakfast. It was having someone who smiled when I walked into a room. It was having someone who seemed to actually want me there. My fatal flaw, if I'm being honest, was believing that I was special, that I was different, that our relationship was different. That because I wasn't some beer-bellied sex tourist groping bar girls on Walking Street, because I genuinely cared about her and her family, because I listened when she talked and remembered the names of her relatives and sent money without being asked, somehow that made me immune to the patterns that destroy other Farang Thai relationships. I thought my love made me special. I thought my age and experience made me wise. I thought my financial stability made me secure. I was wrong about all three. The first crack appeared in March 2021, maybe. April. I lose track now. Whenever the rainy season started that year. Everything before the discovery blurs together into this gray wash of willful ignorance. She started spending more time on her phone. Not dramatically more, just enough that I noticed. She'd be scrolling through line messages and I'd walk past and she'd tilt the screen away. Subtle, instinctive, like she didn't even realize she was doing it. I told myself it was nothing. Thai people are on their phones constantly, I rationalized. It's cultural. Everyone's messaging family and friends all day long. This is normal. You're being a paranoid old man. Then she changed the lock screen password on her phone. I only noticed because I used to glance at the time on her phone sometimes when mine was charging in the other room. One day I picked it up, and the screen required a passcode. It had never required one before. New phone? I asked casually. Same phone, she said. I just want more security. Too many scammers. Made sense. Thailand has scam calls and messages constantly. Reasonable explanation. I accepted it. In May, she started going back to her village more frequently. Once a week became twice a week, became 3 times a week. She'd leave Friday afternoon, come back Sunday night, sometimes Monday morning. Her mother was sick, she said. Her brother needed help with university applications. Her aunt was having family drama. Always something. Always family. I never questioned it. Families in Isaan are tight-knit. Multi-generational homes are normal. Of course she needed to be there. Of course her family needed her. I'm not going to be the controlling Farang who prevents a Thai woman from seeing her own family. That would make me exactly the kind of man I told myself I wasn't. But she started coming back different, distant. She'd be physically present but mentally somewhere else. I'd talk to her over dinner and realize halfway through a sentence that she hadn't heard a word I'd said. She'd be staring at her phone or at the wall or at nothing at all. Everything okay? I'd ask. Fine, she'd say. Just tired. Our sex life changed. It didn't stop, not entirely, but it became perfunctory, routine. She'd go through the motions, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. I'd catch her staring at the ceiling with this blank expression, and when I'd ask if she was okay, she'd snap back to attention and smile and say everything was fine. I told myself she was stressed. Family obligations are exhausting. Her mother's illness was weighing on her. Money was tight for her relatives. She was carrying a lot of emotional burden. Of course she was distracted. Of course she was tired. This had nothing to do with us. The phone calls started in June. Late at night, 2, 3 in the morning. Her phone would buzz on the nightstand and she'd grab it immediately, like she'd been waiting for it. She'd look at the screen, silence it, and put it back down. Who's calling this late? I asked the first time. Friend from village, she said. Drunk. I'll call her tomorrow. The calls kept coming. Different nights. Always late. Always silenced. Always dismissed. One night I woke up at 3 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, speaking Thai in a low, urgent voice. When she saw me, she startled, ended the call immediately. Everything all right? I asked. Yes, she said too quickly. Mother. She called about medicine. I go back to sleep now. But she didn't come back to bed for another hour. I lay there in the dark, listening to her moving around the house, and I felt this cold weight settling in my chest that I couldn't name yet. Didn't want to name. In July, I noticed she was dressing differently. Not provocatively, nothing like that, but more carefully. She'd spend longer getting ready even when she said she was just going to the market. New clothes started appearing in her closet. Nice clothes. Clothes I hadn't bought her. Where'd you get the dress? I asked once. Market, she said. Not expensive, but I'd been to enough Thai markets to know the difference between a 300 baht dress and a 2,000 baht dress. This was the latter. She started wearing makeup to the village, full makeup, to see her sick mother and her village relatives in their bamboo house with chickens running around the yard. It didn't make sense. I started checking her line messages when she was in the shower. I'm not proud of it. It felt dirty, invasive, exactly the kind of thing a insecure, controlling man does. But I couldn't stop myself. The doubt had moved in and taken up residence in my brain, and I needed it gone. I needed proof that I was being paranoid. I needed confirmation that everything was fine. Her phone was locked, every time. She took it into the bathroom with her now, kept it in her purse instead of leaving it on the counter, charged it in the bathroom instead of on the bedroom nightstand. Why do you take your phone everywhere now? I finally asked one morning, trying to keep my voice light and casual. She looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Hard, cold. Why, you ask? You don't trust me? Of course I trust you, I lied. Just seems different. You are different, she said. Always watching me. Always question me. This is not good for relationship. She'd turned it around. Made me the problem. Made my concern the issue instead of her behavior. And it worked. I apologized. I told her she was right. I was being paranoid. I would work on trusting more. But the red flags kept coming, and I kept cataloging them even as I pretended not to notice. In August, I found a receipt in her purse. I wasn't snooping, not exactly. She'd asked me to get her cigarettes from her bag, and when I opened it, the receipt fell out. A hotel in Udon Thani. Not a nice hotel. Not the kind we'd go to, but not a dive either. A mid-range place where you'd go if you wanted privacy but couldn't afford extravagance. The date was from 2 weeks earlier. A Thursday afternoon. A Thursday I'd been home all day, and she'd said she was at the market. My hands started shaking. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I stood there in our bedroom, holding this small piece of paper that was probably nothing, probably innocent, probably explainable, but my body knew before my brain would let itself accept it. I put the receipt back. I didn't mention it. I was too afraid of the answer. 2 days later, I was having coffee at a cafe in town and ran into Michael, an Australian expat I'd met a few times at the immigration office. We chatted. Usual small talk. How's Thailand treating you? Hot season is murder. You following the football? Then, carefully, like he was testing the waters, saw your missus the other day. She was with someone. Thai bloke. Thought it was maybe a relative. My coffee went cold in my hands. Where? That restaurant near the market. The one with the outdoor seating. They looked pretty cozy, mate. Sorry. Probably shouldn't have said anything. When was this? Tuesday? Wednesday? This week sometime. I'd been home Tuesday. Wipada said she was at her friend's house. Wednesday I'd been home too. She said she was at the pharmacy getting medicine for her mother. What did he look like? I asked, even though I already knew I didn't want the answer. Michael shrugged. Thai guy. 30s maybe. Casual clothes. They were sitting close. She was laughing. Look, mate. Could be nothing. Could be a cousin or something. I just thought you should know. Thanks, I said. My voice sounded calm. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the coffee cup with both hands to keep from dropping it. I went home. Wipada was in the garden, watering her herbs. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. That same smile. The one I'd fallen in love with. The one I'd thought existed only for me. How was coffee? She asked. Fine, I said. Who's the Thai man you were having lunch with this week? I watched her face. Watched the smile falter for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. What you talking about? Michael saw you, Tuesday or Wednesday. Restaurant near the market. You were with a Thai man. She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, you mean Niran. He's my friend. I told you about him before. She hadn't. I'd never heard that name in my life. He's my friend from village. He helped me with my mother's medicine. He drive me to pharmacy because you were busy. I wasn't busy. I was home. You could have asked me. You, always working on computer. I don't want to disturb you. I'm retired. I'm never that busy. Her expression hardened. Why you always question me? Why you no trust? Niran is just friend. You are my boyfriend. What more you want from me? I backed down. Again. Apologized. Again. Told her she was right. Again. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, listening to her breathe, and I replayed every conversation, every inconsistency, every late-night phone call, every unexplained absence. I built timelines in my head, cross-referenced stories, looked for patterns, and I found them. God, I found them everywhere once I started looking. The weekend trips to the village that had become more frequent coincided with the new clothes. The late-night phone calls had started right around the time she'd changed her password. The hotel receipt was from a Thursday, the same day of the week she'd been visiting family regularly for the past 3 months. Niran. She'd said his name was Niran. I spent 3 days working up the courage to do what I did next. 3 days of sick anxiety, of barely eating, of lying awake replaying conversations and hating myself for what I was about to do but unable to stop myself. While she was in the shower, I took her phone. I'd watched her enter the password enough times to know it. 290189. I'd assumed it was a date that mattered to her. Her birthday was June 15th. This was February 9th, 1989. 36 years ago. She would have been a baby. Couldn't be her birthday, but it could be someone else's birthday. I got into her phone. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it twice. I opened line. Dozens of conversations. Family, friends, people I didn't know. I scrolled looking for Niran. I found him. The messages went back months, since March, since right when the behavior changes started. I read them. I sat on our bed in our house that I'd bought for us, and I read messages between my girlfriend and another man that made it very clear they weren't friends. "Miss you already," he'd written last week. "When can I see you again?" "This weekend," she'd replied. "He thinks I'm going to village. I'll meet you at the usual place." There were voice messages. I couldn't bring myself to listen to them. The text was bad enough. "I love you," he'd written, repeatedly, in Thai. "Chunrakta, I love you too," she'd replied, every time. There were photos, not explicit, nothing sexual, but intimate. Photos of them together, her sitting on his lap, his arm around her shoulders, her kissing his cheek. Photos time-stamped from weeks ago, months ago. Photos taken in places I recognized. The restaurant Michael had mentioned. A park I'd taken her to on our first date. Our house. Our fucking house. He'd been in our house. I scrolled back further. The messages went back to January 2020, before she'd met me. No, not before. The same time, the same week. I'd met her in January 2020. She'd started messaging him in January 2020. I read one message from February 2020, right after we'd made things official. "Do I have to keep seeing him?" she'd written. "Yes," Niran had replied. "We need the money. Let him buy the house, then we'll figure it out." I sat there. The shower was still running. She was still singing softly, the way she always did when she washed her hair. I sat there on the bed in the house I'd bought and I couldn't move. My body had gone numb. My brain had stopped processing. I just stared at the phone screen and read that message over and over and over. "Let him buy the house, then we'll figure it out." The shower stopped. I heard the water shut off. I put her phone back exactly where it had been. I walked out of the bedroom. I walked outside into the garden. I sat on the bench I'd installed so we could watch the sunset together. I sat there for probably an hour. Maybe it was March, April. Time stopped making sense. The sun was still up when I went outside. It was dark when she found me. "Warren, you okay?" She was in her robe, hair wet, concern on her face that looked so genuine I almost believed it again. "How long have you been seeing Niran?" I asked. I watched her face, watched the calculation happen, watched her decide how much to admit. "What you talking about?" I saw the messages, all of them, since the beginning. Her face went white, then red, then hard. The concern evaporated, and what replaced it was something I'd never seen on her face before. Cold, calculating, angry. "You go through my phone? That's private. You have no right. You've been cheating on me for 2.5 years. "I no cheat. He is just friend. You told him you loved him yesterday. That's Thai culture. We say that to friends." "He's been staying in this house, the house I bought." She was silent. "When I was gone visiting my daughter in March, he was here, wasn't he?" More silence. "All those weekends at the village, you were with him." She exploded. Started yelling in Thai, crying, switching between English and Thai so fast I could barely follow. It was my fault for not trusting her. It was my fault for being old and boring. It was my fault for not understanding Thai culture. I was just another stupid Farang who thought he could buy a Thai woman. She never loved me. She only stayed because I had money. Niran was her real boyfriend. He'd been her boyfriend before me. I'd been the other man this whole time, and I was too stupid to see it. "Then why didn't you just leave?" I asked quietly. "Why stay with me if you hated it so much?" She looked at me with genuine confusion, like the answer was so obvious she couldn't believe I was asking. "Because you bought me a house," she said. "Because you pay for everything. Because he can't." And there it was. The truth. Simple, transactional, brutally honest. "Get out," I said. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. Get out." She left that night. Took her clothes, her phone, her toiletries. Didn't take the furniture she'd bought. Didn't take the plants she'd grown. Just packed 2 bags and called someone, probably Niran, and was gone within an hour. I sat in the empty house and I couldn't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, just this vast gray nothing. For the next 3 months I tortured myself. I couldn't stop. I replayed every memory, every conversation, every moment I thought was real, and I tried to figure out which parts were lies and which parts were true, and I couldn't tell anymore. It all felt contaminated. Even the good memories, especially the good memories, were ruined now because I didn't know if she'd been thinking about him when she was kissing me. I didn't know if she'd been with him that same day. I didn't know if anything she'd said had ever been real. I found out later, through the Expat gossip network that operates like a bush telegraph in every Thai city, that Niran had been her boyfriend for 4 years, since she was 23. They'd broken up briefly, which is when she'd met me, but they'd gotten back together within weeks. Everyone in her village knew. Everyone in her friend group knew. The landlord who'd helped me buy the house knew. There was a man who visited frequently when the old Farang was away. He told me later when I finally asked. He'd assumed I knew. The house stood empty for 6 months. I couldn't sell it. I'd put too much into it. Too much money, too much hope, too much of myself. I finally rented it out to a young Thai family last year. I live in a condo now, smaller, easier. No garden, no memories in the walls. I saw Wipada once, about a year after she left. She was at a restaurant with Niran. She saw me, smiled, waved, like we were old friends who'd simply drifted apart. Like she hadn't spent 2.5 years playing me for a fool. Like I hadn't bought her a house with money I'd spent my entire working life earning. I don't hate her. I wish I did. Hate would be cleaner, easier, but I don't. I just feel empty when I think about her. What haunts me most is knowing I was never her boyfriend. I was her sponsor, her walking ATM, her retirement plan, and Niran was probably in on it from the start. The sick mother, the struggling brother, the university fees, all of it designed to make me feel needed so I'd keep giving. And I did. God, I gave everything. Was any of it real? I'll never know. She told me she loved me. She cried in my arms about her childhood. She laughed at my jokes. She made me feel alive again. Was she acting the entire time? Or was there some small part of her that genuinely cared about the old Farang who bought her a house? I replay the memories, and I can't tell anymore. The morning coffees in the garden, the way she'd fall asleep with her head on my chest, the time she spent 3 hours cooking my favorite meal for my birthday. Were those real? Or were they investments, deposits in the bank of my trust that she could withdraw later when she needed more money? Part of me, the sick, masochistic part that I can't seem to silence, wishes I could ask her. Sit her down and say, was any of it real? Did you ever actually care? But I know what she'd say. She'd tell me what I wanted to hear, just like she did for 2.5 years. I'd never get the truth. The thing about being 76 is you don't have endless time to recover from mistakes like this. I spent 5 years, the last good years I probably have, on a woman who was planning her exit before we'd even properly begun. I gave her a house. I gave her my trust. I gave her my hope that I could still matter to someone, still be loved, still have that connection I'd been missing since my wife left. And she took it all and gave it to another man who was probably laughing at me the entire time. I've learned things, I suppose. Red flags are called red flags for a reason. When a woman in her 20s wants a man in his 70s, there's usually a reason, and it's not love. When the phone password changes suddenly, something is being hidden. When someone starts spending more time away, they're spending that time with someone. When your gut tells you something is wrong, your gut is usually right. But knowing those things now doesn't help. It's like learning to swim after you've already drowned. I should have listened to my daughter. I should have listened to Michael when he first saw them together. I should have confronted her the first time I felt that cold doubt creeping in, but I didn't. Because I wanted to believe. Because at 71, newly single, living alone in a foreign country, I was desperate to believe that someone could still want me for me and not for what I could provide. And that desperation made me blind, made me ignore every warning sign, made me rationalize every inconsistency, made me believe that my love was special enough, different enough, strong enough to overcome age gaps and cultural differences, and the basic mathematical reality that a beautiful woman in her 20s has no reason to choose a man in his 70s unless there's money involved. I was a fool. An old, lonely, desperate fool. The house is still there. The family renting it is lovely. They take good care of it. They send me photos of the garden sometimes. The herbs Wipada planted are still growing. Her jasmine vine covers the whole back wall now. It blooms every year. I hope she's happy. I mean that. I hope Niran treats her well. I hope whatever they have is real. I hope she got what she needed from me and built something genuine with him afterward. But I also hope that someday, maybe years from now, she'll think back on the old British man who bought her a house and wonder if it could have been different, if she'd chosen differently, if she'd been honest. I doubt she will, but I hope it anyway. If you're reading this and you're an older man with a much younger Thai girlfriend, please, I'm begging you, pay attention to the red flags. The changed password, the increased time away, the late-night phone calls, the new clothes you didn't buy, the friends you've never met, the family you're never invited to visit with her, the village trips that happen too frequently. Don't do what I did. Don't rationalize. Don't convince yourself you're different. Don't believe that your love is special enough to overcome basic realities. And if you catch her cheating, don't stay. Don't try to fix it. Don't listen when she says it meant nothing or it was just a mistake or she'll change. Leave. Immediately. Completely. Because the person you thought you loved never existed in the first place. I bought a house for a fantasy. I spent 2.5 years living with a woman whose real boyfriend was probably sleeping in my bed the moment I left for the airport. Don't be me. I found that spare key in the planter box 3 months after she left. I still don't know if it was for me or for him. I threw it away. But the question remains. Every night, when I'm lying alone in my condo, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories that might have all been lies, was it ever real? Was any of it real? I'll never know. And that's the worst part.